Okay, YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with the rant accompanying the previous two videos, which were titled Insight into the Psychopath Within, which was a ABC Radio Hindsight, a Radio National Hindsight program interview with a fellow called James Fallon. And by the way, this is a malt liquor video. I can't drink it for you because I've already drunk it for you, because this is take 3. I didn't like number 1, I didn't like number 2. But anyway, James Fallon was a neuropsychologist, neurophysiologist, who spent his whole career studying the links between radiologically demonstrable neuroanatomical anomalies, like something going wrong in the dorsal anterior cingulate, being associated with people who have really, really low impulse control. They get really angry really quick. They can't deal with frustrations. They make a lot of bad decisions, and they tend to wind up bumping into the judicial system, the police system, going to jail and getting in trouble. And he was also cross-referencing people who had alleged gene markers for criminality. And here we take a sidetrack, segue warning. Maybe a year, 2 years ago, in New Scientist magazine, there was an article on orchid children and dandelion children. And the orchid children were really, really sensitive, and you had to give them really, really good parenting. And if they got the good parenting, they'd all turn out to be excellent musicians, philosophers, thinkers, scientists, really good people, you know, like high-grade surgeons or whatever. If the orchid children did not get interactive, empathic, sensitive parenting when they were young, they turned out to be safe breakers, drug runners, meth lab cooks. You know, they either got really good parenting or they turned out to be arseholes. And there were the dandelion children who were not nearly so sensitive. The dandelion children were like the dandelions. They could be raised in sand between rocks, and as long as they got a decent dew every now and then, they would still grow up roughly strong. They would produce a flower. You put an orchid in such conditions and it would not germinate, let alone grow and produce a flower. So orchid children, dandelion children. And the reason I raise this is because in Israel, where they did the study, they commenced with a whole bunch of 3-year-olds who allegedly had all the genes to mark them out as future criminals. And they used as a control group a bunch of normal kids, and the test was to see how empathic and how sensitive they were when the child and the researcher both got a packet of lollies, sweeties, candies, sugary biscuits, whatever it was. And the child got a packet with 6 in it and opened it up and was really happy and highly delighted. The researcher got a packet, there was only 1 in it. And one group of children, they readily offered, without being prompted, to share their sweet with the researcher. They, at 3 years old, they could empathise with the sense of disappointment in opening a supposedly full packet and only getting 1 sugary candy sweet, and they offered to share their own sugary candy sweets. And that was not the group of normal children. That was the group of children who allegedly were going to grow up genetically marked out to be criminals. And it turned out that the gene marker was not for criminality. It was for sensitivity. So we got this whole article on orchid children. So when we hear James Fallon talking about how he personally had all the gene markers to be a criminal, as well as the anatomical CAT scannable differences in his brain to make him into an axe murderer, as well as the family history of being linearly descended from, I think there was 3 murderers out of 5 generations, as going all the way back to the first person, the first European in North America to kill their own mother. So yeah, that was James Fallon. But when he said he had the gene markers, he may have meant for sensitivity, not for criminality, because he recorded that interview before the Israelis published their paper and it was covered in New Scientist. I think. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Now, James Fallon, in the longer 1 hour version of that interview that Hindsight put out half of, he mentioned how he went home from, or went downstairs from, discovering that he was the perfect Gandalf, as he called himself, with all the gene markers and all the brain features that mean he really should have been a wicked, evil person. And he mentioned to his wife that he had all these gene markers for being a psychopath, and she said, "Yes, dear, that's nice, I'm not surprised." And he said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you've got a terribly shallow personality, dear. There's not much depth to you." And he asked all of his friends and all the rest of them, and they said, "Yeah, that's pretty right. You know, like, we knew you as well in the first 5 minutes as we know you now after 10 years. And it turned out that James Fallon had been kind of like a miracle baby. His parents did not think they could have a kid. They'd had several stillbirths and several miscarriages and maybe a kid that died, you know, as an infant. A neonatal death, SIDS, you know, sudden infant death syndrome. So they thought they couldn't have a kid. They went for years with no pregnancies, and then along came James. So all the women in the family, his mother, his aunties, his grandma, you know, all the female cousins, they all doted on him because he was this miracle baby. So he got lots and lots and lots of cuddles, lots and lots and lots of eye contact. You know, he was like the ideal human child, which has 35 moments of eye contact per minute awake for the first 3 years, because there's always a loving, consistent carer present while the child is awake. So what James Fallon proves is that no matter how otherwise predisposed to be sensitive and angry, if you cuddle your babies, the kid will turn out better than if you do not cuddle your babies. Now, on the other fella's point of eye contact, I'd have to draw a caveat in there. Looking somebody in the eye is how a European sends a message to the other person who has the same cultural background, to the effect that I am being trustworthy, I am looking you in the eye. That only works with Europeans. If you look at an Indigenous Australian in the eye, they think either you want to have sex with them or you want to fight with them. The eyes are the window to the soul, and it is a culturally specific thing. However, I did find it interesting that old mate suggested that if children who had trouble empathising with other people, if he backtracked them, he found that their mothers looked them in the eye, but their fathers did not look them in the eye. And I didn't spend a lot of time looking my dad in the eye, but I tell you what, both my kids were born on the living room couch, and being a time expired registered nurse, I changed an awful lot of their nappies. And I'd have to say, speaking as a father, you can make as much eye contact with a baby while you're changing its nappy as you can while you're feeding it a bottle. So maybe in order to raise mentally healthy children, they should have lots of eye contact with both parents. I know they should have at least one parent, perhaps a sibling or a grandma or an auntie or an uncle, maybe a really interested next door neighbour, but they should have a consistent, loving carer with them every moment they're awake for the first 3 years. There's no point getting an accountant married to a lawyer if their average hourly income is $175 per hour, and getting their kid and putting them with 4 others in a long-stay daycare facility being looked after by a 16-year-old who left school at the end of year 10 and is getting paid $15 an hour. $3 an hour worth of semi-skilled training wage type childcare is not sufficient in terms of empathy, individual connection, consistency, explanation for how the world works, role modelling that the kid's going to find useful. Some of the most useful role modelling I did was when I was 3 years old. running around my father's automotive engineering workshop and actually playing in his father's blacksmith shop out the back. It was all still there. I didn't have to actually be underfoot. I just had to be able to see the old man and, keep an eye on him. If humans raise their children and put as much work and care into each baby, infant, child, adolescent as a kangaroo or a swamp wallaby does with a joey before that joey grows up to its age at first mating, if humans put proportionally as much work into raising their kids as kangaroos and swamp wallabies did, I reckon the world would be a much, 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 much happier place, and we wouldn't be worried about these alleged psychopathic killers. Psycho meaning out of touch with reality, and pathic meaning pathological, meaning diseased or dangerous. On James Fallon's experiments to try and change the way he related to people, he may be onto something there. I'm 53. When I was 19, I was sent to the staff psychologist and we were paid to talk to each other. And I used to think I was normal before that. His best strategy was for me to count to 7 before I opened my mouth and spoke in conversation, because after 7 seconds from me first thinking of the brilliant, witty, excoriating, probably sexually double-meaning comment I could inject, the moment would have moved on. The conversation would be about something else, and all the other people would think I was an idiot if I said something 7 seconds after it had ceased to be funny. So basically he was telling me to shut up and watch what happens and think about what you say. That's pretty much all the psychopaths need to do, is stop acting on this immediate selfish impulse. If the alleged psychopath, the person with a really difficult personality disorder, if they're having trouble interacting with other humans, the answer is shut up and think about how you would feel if somebody said that to you or did that to you. Really, the way to deal with having had, substandard parenting and turning out to be an alleged psychopath is get into the 11th commandment. Do unto others, or the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Think about how it would feel if somebody said that to you, did that to you. It's raining. It's sundown. I feel sorry for the people in the Adelaide Hills and Victoria who don't apparently know how to rain dance. I've had 6.55 inches in December, 2 inches in November. Behind me, you're looking at burn number 36 in my hazard reduction program. North, south, east and west of here, people spent 2 months getting hammered by vicious windy hailstorms while I had gentle rain off the edges of it. Learn to rain dance? If you don't know how to rain dance, go and talk to your local Aboriginal Land Council, tribal elders. Ask them to teach you. Because you have to dance on land that you feel responsible for. Just think, I could have been a psychopathic killer, but it's so much more fun to be a pacifist vegetarian greenie tree hugger living on an endangered species sanctuary. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.